Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire to Lead, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. All right, podcast listeners, you are in for a huge treat because I got Lainie Rowell with me with her brand new launch book. It's finally launched after a few stressful days, but Evolving with Gratitude. I have it in my hands, and I have had the great pleasure of being behind the scenes, a part of this project, and I cannot wait to talk with her about this. And Lainie, you've been on the podcast before. If anyone's listening right now, you got to go back, check it out, because she is phenomenal, not only as an educator, but as a person, and I just appreciate you being on the podcast today.
Well, you are just so kind, Josh, and you really are one of my favorite people. And I feel very honored and blessed to get to come back and talk to you again on the Aspire podcast. So I'm very grateful. And can I add that I'm also very grateful you are one of the contributors to Evolving with Gratitude.
Well, that goes both ways.
It's such a wonderful, wonderful story that you share. And I was so excited when you said you would do it. So thank you.
Well, I am extremely grateful for the opportunity. It's such a phenomenal book, and I can't wait to talk more about that. But before we dive into your new launch book, can you just share a little bit about yourself, just in case for those who haven't had a chance to listen to the previous episode?
Sure. So I am in my 25th year of education, which I'm getting ready to stop saying the years. Because I mean, unless people were like, did you start teaching in elementary school? Yeah. I don't think anyone's thinking that. So I just think I need to maybe lay off the number of years. I am an experienced educator, my friend. So I've been in education quite a long time. I've been in the classroom. I've been a district leader. I am a full-time consultant right now. I spend the majority of my time as a consultant for Orange County Department of Ed here in Southern California, but I also do travel around speaking and consulting. And then I'm a podcaster and an author. So that's the big stuff, I think.
Yes, most definitely. You do a lot of different things in education, which I'm super excited to talk about, not only the book, but your brand new podcast. But I want to geek out with you a little bit. Because me and you, we've had several conversations about just the amount of studying you did prior to the book and while you were writing. And I'm just wondering, when you were going through and researching, what was something new that you learned about gratitude?
Well, I will say, to start off, I thought when I wanted to write this book, I thought I was writing a book on school culture, which for sure it is. But what I think I was most pleasantly surprised to learn was actually the impact on learning.
Right.
And, you know, how, and I'm not geeky enough to get into all the neuroscience. I like to just say the happiness chemicals, right? The dopamine, the serotonin, and I'll let the experts define the very specific nuance between the dopamine and motivation and serotonin and pleasure. And, you know, and I don't even know if they agree on that yet. But what I did learn is when you have those happiness chemicals going, you actually activate the learning centers in the brain. And so it was really, really fun to realize that this was something that I think just we kind of common sense know. Obviously, sense of belonging is a big deal. Yep. Gratitude is a way to make sure people, you know, they feel seen, heard, valued, appreciated, and all of that. You know, I just couldn't believe all the benefits. And so it wasn't only about school culture. It definitely is. But it was also about nurturing relationships, improving well-being, and activating learning. And if you want me to geek a little more,
you know, I always like geeking out.
Let me just share, because this was really surprising to me. So I've already kind of mentioned some of these, but kind of the 6 big benefits that I found out was that it helps us cope with stress. Mm-hmm. It helps us regulate our emotions. Practicing gratitude obviously makes us happier, but it also improves our health. Not just our mental, but our physical health, which was pretty astounding to me. And then, like I said, nurtures relationships and activates learning. So there was an intuitive thing in me that I'm like, I know this is good for schools. I know this is good for learning communities. And then just to find out there were even more benefits than I could imagine was just a real joy.
Yes. Yeah. And that was the thing that, you know, I was noticing. And, you know, you even talked about like the age range of students and kind of like the development of that, and with gratitude specific. Mm-hmm. And I think we can talk about that probably, you know, in each section. But I thought you broke down the pieces really practically. And so, you know, the first part, you talked about gratitude practices. And so I think a lot of people have an understanding of what gratitude means to themselves, but what are some ways that they can share gratitude within their schools, in their classroom, to hopefully help all those 6 different ways to improve their life?
One of the other things that I really appreciated learning as I was going through the research is just there's not just one way to do this. So, like you said, there's a whole chapter on the practices, and I wanted to give a variety of practices because the overwhelming, most popular, most well-known practice is a gratitude journal. And we see these used in schools. We see, there are teachers who have kids who do a gratitude journal, and then they can share out something that they're grateful for, which, by the way, has this added benefit of not only does the person sharing get to express gratitude, but those around the person hearing it in this really interesting social contagion kind of empathy way actually experience the gratitude themselves. Nice. So it's just a really beautiful thing that it's just contagious, and it impacts the whole learning community. So there's just so many different things. And I didn't want it to just be a gratitude journal that we were talking about. So we talk about savoring. I specifically talk about savoring walks, but I do talk about how there's other savoring rituals that you can do. I mean, you can savor a cup of coffee. There's all these things that you can do, but I talk specifically about maybe how you could bring savoring walks into education. We spend so much time indoors. Wouldn't it be great if we could actually bring those wonderful bodies outside to do something that maybe has a connection to science or a writing prompt or something like that? And then I also talk, one of the practices that I really like to share is counterfactual thinking, or you can call it mental subtraction. And so it's this idea of, you think of something really critical in your life, a very important person or an event, and then you imagine your life without that person or event, and you think of all the ripple effects. And then as a result of that, you're going to really appreciate that person or event for what it has brought to your life. So those are just 3 of the kind of big ones. And then also getting into things like, well, if you go and you teach kids, and this is good for adults too, I think, the protocol of notice, think, feel, and do, then you can have a more deep experience. So we want to notice first, obviously, right? Think about, why this came to us. Why is this important? Really savor, I love the word savor, as you can tell, savor the feelings that this positive thing is giving us. And then if you can do something to maybe show how grateful you are for that thing, that's wonderful too.
All right. So I want to dive into the other 3 pieces. You have gratitude with kids, gratitude with peers, and gratitude with the world. And as we do that, I'm going to savor my coffee as we speak.
Good.
So with the kids part, I love that piece. Obviously, looking at schools, that's an easy connection to make. But for our teachers, for administrators who are listening, what is some ways that they can show gratitude with their students?
Well, and I love even the way you phrased that question, gratitude for kids, because we obviously want kids to be grateful. We want them to be grateful for learning. We want them to be grateful for the relationships in this learning community. But first, we have to be grateful for our kids. And one of the things that I really wanted to put in the book, and it didn't make it, is the VIA.org character strengths. I really want us to think about, and I'm not perfect at this. To be clear, I'm not perfect at any of this. And I write books because I want answers, not because I have answers. Exactly. And so I think what we have to do is that we have to make sure every kid feels seen, heard, known, and valued. And maybe at that particular day, it's really hard to find something academically to acknowledge them for, but we can always go to character strengths. And there is a character strength for every kid, even the ones who challenge us the most, and they need us the most, is what I often find. So we can get into those character strengths, and, maybe it's bravery, maybe it's, something that maybe they don't even see in themselves. Maybe it's, being kind to someone else, but there's all these things that we can look into and see with an asset-based frame. This is what this kid has to offer. And I want to make sure they know that.
Yeah, I wrote that down. So you have a quote in here. The kids who challenge us the most are the ones who need us the most. And that's so true.
It really, really is. And I really want to make sure sense of belonging has been something top of mind, I think, for a lot of us, especially since COVID, where we, didn't have that necessarily direct connection with kids, at least for a while.
Yep.
And Yuritsa Vijalba was on Lemonade Learning a while back. And one of the things that she said that was so profound is she's like, teachers were upset about the black screens, kids not having their cameras on. And her observation was those black screens were there before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't know it.
Yep.
And so we really just need to make sure everyone feels seen, known, heard, and valued.
Yeah. So let's talk about gratitude with peers, because I love this section, because I think that sometimes it's easy as a teacher to think about your students first, but it's probably hard to think about the peers and coworkers that you are in the same building with. So how can they use gratitude with their peers every single day?
Well, I mean, you're an expert at this. You're an expert at all three of them, by the way. You're an expert with kids, peers, and the world.
I appreciate that confidence.
Well, I know this to be true. We had conversations, and you were one of the people. So if there's a story by someone in the book, I consider them a gratitude mentor, meaning that I see things in them where they are able to acknowledge and amplify other people, and they have what I would consider a grateful disposition. If they're in the book, that's what I see in them. And so I asked people based on that, but there were certain people who I said, I want you to talk about this. And you were one of those people, because I love how you have brought, and I don't want to give away your story because it's so good. I want people to be able to read it themselves. But if you're willing to share anything, I would love to turn the tables and let you talk about it. But I'll just say this really quickly about the peers section. And one of the things that I start off with is talking about profound gratitude. And sometimes we get put in these situations where we have a teaching partner or a leadership partner or someone who actually is just like everything. Like they make our lives so much better in that they are just a great collaborator, a great thought partner. And sometimes, just like family and close friends, they're the ones that we forget to show that gratitude to. I almost think it's not for lack of feeling it. It's just, you don't even know how to express it. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just tell you really quickly, I talk about Colleen Kelly Gurney in the book, and I got to yesterday drop the book off and hand it to her and say, there's a little page I want you to read about, because she was so important to me. We got to co-teach. We actually taught in the same classroom for a period of time. And I just, looking back, don't think I ever showed enough appreciation to her. So I did get it in the book, but that's, better late than never. For sure. But that's a regret that I'll have, is that I don't think I ever showed her enough gratitude in the moments. And so that's something that I think we can all be more intentional with.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing I think about, is just the reflection piece of, I wish I was more intentional. I wish I had more time to do this, as far as showing gratitude to my staff. So yeah, my story is about, real quick, I had a phenomenal mentor and principal that I worked with, Sandra Pegram, and we really spent and were very intentional about trying to find ways to show gratitude, and not how it made us comfortable with showing gratitude, but how they wanted to be seen and heard, and to get that acknowledgement. So that's what the story is about, is us trying to find that. And thankfully we had a resource that we leaned on to find some success in that. But by no means do I feel like I'm an expert, but at least we did try to show gratitude to our staff. Well,
I don't know that anyone's an expert. Even the experts are pretty humble about saying, like, this is what we know so far. This is what we are trying to do. What I thought you have really helped me find clarity on is this idea of how I want to express gratitude is not necessarily how the person wants to receive gratitude.
Correct, yeah.
And you really helped me have more clarity on that. And then the other thing you helped me have clarity on is, and I think we can divulge this here, you wrote about the 5 love languages in the workplace. And that's not the exact title of Gary Chapman's book, and there's a co-author, but appreciation in the workplaces. Yeah. So what I love that you said, actually, when you were on my podcast, is that you talked about how just because someone maybe favors acts of service doesn't mean you do acts of service every single time. And it's so true. We're all unique and dynamic, but also that gets to be a monotonous if, we want to throw some variety in there. So, and so if you don't know what someone's love language is, no worries, because maybe they need some variety anyways. Maybe they've been getting a lot of, quality time, and they need something a little more brief as their appreciation. So
for sure. I love it. All right. So let's talk about the world. This is a fun chapter too, because this is something that goes a little bit beyond just the scope of our four walls that we potentially are in with our students and our peers. So how can we show gratitude to the world?
I mean, you dug into this book, Josh. You've only had it.
I love this book. I absolutely
you're so kind. You're so kind. This was a really fun one for me. So I will say that getting kids learning beyond the four walls of our classroom, beyond our school, has always been a huge passion of mine. I always like to think about how can we get kids connected globally, all those sorts of things. So one of the approaches I took talking about gratitude with the world is pro-social learning. Like, what are the things that we could do that connect with what's happening outside of our school campus, like to bigger, issues in the world? How can we do that? And it could be on a very simple scale. Like, it could be, we're grateful for food. So we're going to compost. We're going to have a school garden. We're going to help out in the cafeteria. Like, it can be little things. It could be things that have a bigger implication. So it could be these little things that are planting the seed in our kids for more of an awareness of how they can be better people. It could have a direct connection, especially when we start talking about our older learners. Service learning is not something that's brand new. It's been around. We have older students who can actually get off campuses and do things. They can run sports clinics. They're grateful for athletics. They can run athletics clinics. They're grateful to have a good education. They can run after school tutoring programs. There's all these ways that we can bring pro-social learning in. That is one part of the chapter. Yeah. I also really wanted to shine a light on, you're one of these people. There's a lot of people in our professional learning family who are very good at amplifying other people. And, I think social media is so, so wonderful. It does have its downsides. But one of the things I think about when I'm going to social media is I narrow my time to three things I'm allowed to do on social media. I'm allowed to go on and express gratitude for someone. I'm allowed to share something that I learned, or I'm allowed to learn something. But I really try to avoid scrolling through my feed.
Right.
I do it sometimes because that's another way to show appreciation, but I really limit the amount of time that I do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm usually more searching on social media or going directly to a person that I know is an expert on something and seeing what they're sharing about. Yeah. So there's kind of a lot of different ways you can go in the gratitude with the world piece, but the pro-social learning and the publicly expressing gratitude are kind of the two big ways in that chapter.
Yeah, I like how you narrowed that down for social media, because I think you can get in the weeds or spend a lot of time just, especially in the feed. I find creating lists also helps me, especially on Twitter, because otherwise I can go down a rabbit hole that might take an hour of my time that I really should not be giving an hour to. So
it's hard to step away from the dopamine casino, right? Like it's a real tough spot to get out of. So
definitely trying to be somewhere I can improve in my own practices.
We all can, yeah.
So let's pivot, because you got a new project right now. I had the pleasure of being on as a guest, but you've got a new podcast, Evolving with Gratitude, has the same title as your new book. So where did the project come from, and what are you doing moving forward with that podcast?
Well, where it's going, we'll see. I think I know, but it's hard to say. But
evolving.
It's evolving. Exactly. Love that word, evolving. But it came from, I have an opportunity to there's 18 stories by 20 amazing educators in the book, but I have a lot of gratitude mentors, and I have a lot of amazing people in my professional learning family, my professional learning community. So I have a great network. And I knew that I couldn't get them all into the book as much as I wanted to. So this was my opportunity so there's two big buckets of guests that are on the show. One is the contributors, where we get to meet them and hear a little bit more about them. And then the other is people who I just really want to connect with, and I think other people are going to love to hear from. Yeah. So as Josh, you probably know, and maybe you do this too, like part of the reason to have a podcast is to learn from people that maybe you would have no other
For sure.
reason to say, hey, do you want to jump on a Zoom with me? So it's really been that. Once I submitted the manuscript, the initial, before it went into developmental editing, I was just like, what's next? I'm not done talking about gratitude. I'm not done learning about gratitude is really the thing. It's not about me talking about it. It's about me learning about it. So I really wanted to keep it going. Mm-hmm. The podcast has been a real blessing. And I'm so grateful that you came on and you share so many wonderful things, as you always do. Well, and yeah, so we'll see where it goes. Right now it's weekly. I don't know how you do that, but I'm going to try and keep up with it because the weekly is intense, my friend.
It's a lot. Yeah. I think that's the one thing folks don't understand. It's just the behind the scenes and the amount of work that it takes to put it out. And me and you have talked before. I actually was putting out 2 episodes a week. And yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of work. But what you have another podcast too. I don't want to.
Oh no, we can't leave that out.
Too. So will you talk about that?
Yes. So Bree Hodges and I do Lemonade Learning. We are on current hiatus because Bree is a very, very busy woman in general.
Oh my gosh.
She's so amazing and she's doing so many wonderful things. She's got some great projects, some great work going on. And then I've been really busy with the book. So we're hoping to launch that again soon.
Nice.
That's a TBD. We will be vacationing together in Nashville in the near future.
Very
we will
cool.
chat about it then.
Yeah. Well, I'll be on pins and needles because I love that show.
Oh, you're
so wonderful. And I'm going to put a link for everything. So your book,
thank you,
and both the podcasts. And then, of course, you're constantly consulting and speaking. Do you have any speaking events coming up soon?
So August seems to be the really, really big month. I do have a good amount going on with conferences in July. In fact, there's some that I'm like leaving one, catching a red eye, going to the next. It's a little like intense, but yeah, so no, I'm still really fortunate that I still get to do some remote sessions, mm-hmm. which they have a place. I don't think they should replace the in-person. I do think there's a real value. I mean, I think in my perfect world, it would be like an in-person kickoff and then there's some remote mm-hmm. so that no disrespect, but I don't like to do the drive-by. Like I want to build relationships. I want to have ongoing professional learning. We know this, it has to be ongoing and job embedded for it to be effective. Yeah. So that's my ideal, is that we kick off in person. There's some remote as much as possible. There's some in-person, maybe coaching. And then, we maybe do some sort of culminating at the end of the year. So I've been actually really blessed that that's been happening in more and more of the schools that I work with. And I'm just hoping that continues because I want more interactions.
Yeah. I'm super excited that, the in-person stuff's going on, but I'm with you. It is nice to be able to share with folks and not have to take a flight somewhere. So I do always appreciate that, being able to connect with other folks and share information without, having to do like what you said of jumping on one plane to the next and potentially missing flights and whatnot.
Oh my God. Don't get me started on travel. I mean, my dad is a pilot. My mom is, they're both retired, but flight attendant and pilot. And I grew up on planes, but just going back to really quickly, the remote, I would say, I know how busy teachers are. So mm-hmm. the fact that we can do the remotes where I can meet with a group of teachers for just an hour rather than taking a whole day, I think that's a real benefit. So I hope we're real intentional moving forward, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater either way, for in-person or for virtual. So
great point.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
All right, so Lainie, let's talk about, for our aspiring and current leaders, I always like leaving the podcast with an action step. And so I would like to be intentional about gratitude, since that's what this whole podcast episode's about. So do you have something that, they can do tomorrow or next week to enhance their skills in the area of gratitude?
So I think making space for it. So there's, me showing gratitude to individuals on my staff. There's making space for it at staff meetings. And going back to what you've taught me about not making it monotonous, that doesn't mean like every staff meeting has 20 minutes of a gratitude shout out. Like that gets a little bit old.
Oh, for sure.
So trying to keep it fresh. Yeah. And then how can you amplify with the world? So can you share what teachers are doing that's amazing on social media, and not just teachers, your custodians, your cafeteria workers, the front office, the people who really, it's not just the teachers that make a school run. There's a lot of people, and especially the people who do not get a lot of appreciation time. Yeah. I think we need to do that. So there's people in the book that are doing this, and they talk about it. What I love is every single administrator who shares in the book has a different way of doing it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really beautiful. I'm going to share one more of your tips, Josh, because I think this is really important. Or would you like to share it?
No, please.
Okay. I love how intentional you were in making sure that you are not missing someone on your staff. Because I think just like in the classroom, we have the kids who are the high flyers and they're like making our lives easier. We also have the kids who challenge us. They need us the most probably, but we also have the silent ones. And sometimes they're the most forgotten. They don't hear their name. They might not hear positive or negative for extended periods of time. And I think the same thing for staff. Yeah. And so I really love that you put that in your story. And by the way, there's a lot more to his story. So we have not given away everything in this podcast. You need to read Josh's story. It's so good. But I really appreciated that you made that point about being intentional, make sure everyone feels it.
Well, I'm honored. Thank you. Those are kind words. Lainie, I appreciate all that you provide to so many in education, and I want my listeners to be able to connect with you. So how can they do that on social media, or if they want to, learn more about your consulting or speaking events and how to book you, how would they do that?
Absolutely. So I am, and thank you for that. I am Lainie Rowell across the web. Unfortunately, neither of those names are easy to spell. Lainie, and I know Josh will probably have this in the show notes, so I won't worry too much about it, but Lainie, and then Rowell, like Powell, Rowell. So I am LainieRowell.com, at Lainie Rowell, pretty much on all the socials. I'm mostly on Twitter and Instagram, and would love to connect with anyone. I'm even Lainie Rowell at Gmail. So if you want to shoot me an email, I always respond. If I don't respond, some nasty filter has gotten in our way, and I apologize about that. Let me just share that. So Josh, you know this because you're a published author, and maybe you didn't feel this, but maybe you did. There is some anxiety as you are not able to do anything for your book and waiting for people to do things to get it up on the spaces to be available to the world. So I harness that energy. It's because I'm somewhat an impatient person. I have many flaws, but I harnessed that energy and I made some free gifts. And if this is going out quickly, there's probably still some opportunities to do it. You can find it on social media. You just show proof of purchase of the book, and then there's a printable thank you cards. You can print it or do it digitally. It's a guided gratitude practice booklet. Yep. And then I would love I have these little book plates, and I'm showing it like anyone can see it. I know Josh has already seen it, but anyways.
I have it in my book.
You're so sweet. So I love book plates. Who knew about book plates, right? So it's basically just a little sticker, a big sticker. It's a label. I can write you a little note because I'd love to connect with you, and then I can send it to you. And if you want, you can slap it on the inside of your book. So I'm happy to send those. There's a Google form online. You can catch it on Twitter pretty easily.
Yeah, Lainie wrote out a very sweet note, and I need to stick that in my book, but it's actually a bookmark for me right now as I go through the book. But yeah, so if they go onto Twitter, they can find information and then be able to get those 3 gifts. So that's amazing. That's an addition that is pretty nice, especially because this book is phenomenal. So I can't say it enough. Make sure that you're checking this book out, purchasing it as soon as possible. And like Lainie said, I'll have everything in the show notes, so it'll be easy for you to click and to get all of those different things. And then also to take a listen to the many podcasts that Lainie's a part of. And we'll get you connected with her so you can also utilize her in the consulting and speaking space. But before we end, Lainie, I just want to thank you so much for all that you do. I am so blessed to be connected with you and to call you my friend, and I'm also honored to be a little piece of a phenomenal resource with this book, Evolving with Gratitude.
You are an essential piece in this book, and it warms my heart. I just am so happy you're in it. Thank you. You complete the book, and I'm really grateful to have you in it.